So if you want a good laugh here, Trump is fundamentally incapable of stopping this wrong strategy that he's doing for the 2020 election. Trump campaign considers displaying statues at future rallies. The president criticized those calling for removal of controversial monuments. You know how there's, people said about hippies like, oh, they're tree huggers. Trump is like a statue hugger. He's become like the right-wing parody of the left-wing stereotype. Okay, how many times have we gone over this? You can't run on the culture war and on statues when you have a pandemic killing people all across the country and an economic depression. You're going to get your ass handed to you, which is why in every single poll, Biden maintains a colossal lead. Because people get the sense like, oh, this guy's ridiculous. He's just talking about the culture war as like the country's falling apart. What are you doing? And now he's taking a step where he's like, oh my God, my culture war thing is not working. Let's do it even more. Get some statues behind me at an event and I'll hug like a George Washington statue or something. Now, by the way, Trump also declared that the U.S. is in a culture war. He said it. And he went on to call flying the Confederate flag, quote, freedom of speech. Now, listen, if somebody on their own private property wants to do whatever with that Confederate flag, it's their property. They get to do whatever they want with that flag. That is freedom. That is whatever they want. But pulling down the Confederate flag on public land, it's not free speech to have a Confederate flag or Confederate monuments on public land. That is not free speech because the government represents all of us. And so to fly a Confederate flag or put up a Confederate monument, that is literally a symbol of oppression for many Americans living in those states. So black people are paying for a monument or a flag that represents a giant middle finger to them. No, the government is supposed to represent us. Represent us, all of us. So putting a Confederate flag up or a Confederate monument on public land is not free speech. On private land, it is. It is free speech. Doesn't matter how much we dislike the Confederate flag. It is free speech on private land, not on public land. So he's wrong when he says that. But also note the irony. Note the irony. Trump does not think burning an American flag is free speech. If it's your own American flag, it absolutely is free speech. The Supreme Court ruled exactly that in 1989. But he says burning a flag is not free speech. He wants to punish that with a year in jail. But keeping up Confederate flags on public land is free speech. Totally wrong, totally backwards. And again, you could tell here that he's just leaning into the culture war. Now, the little cherry on top at the end of this story, just to show you how immensely cynical Trump is and that he doesn't have a strong position on any of this garbage. He's doing it because he views it as a vessel to continued power for himself. He thinks this is the way to win the election, so this is the avenue I'm going to go. But look at what Trump said. This is in 2015. This is 5 years ago. This is not that long ago. Look at what he said about the Confederate flag back then.
You're the lone Republican presidential candidate who has yet to weigh in on whether or not you think the Confederate flag should be flying above the State House in South Carolina. Do you think it needs to go?
I think it probably does, and I think they should put it in the museum, let it go, respect whatever it is that you have to respect because it was a point in time, and put it in a museum. But I would take it down, yes.
What was it, Don? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? What is it that you really believe? He's vapid. He doesn't even know what he really believes, because it's not about that. It's about, I want to be president, and I want to say or do whatever I think I can in order to continue to be president and to win this next election. Right now, I think my best strategy is going all in on the culture war, so I'm going to go all in on the culture war. That's what he's doing. That's what it is. Total clown. Total clown. I do find it amazing. How are you going to run for president? And you don't even know what you believe on these issues. Like, that isn't that thing number one is like you have to have strong beliefs on all these different issues to run for office, no matter what your opinion is. Shouldn't you have one when talking about these issues? No, back then, yeah, pull it down. I think it makes sense. You know, they're symbols of people who seceded from the U.S. It's like, why are we venerating literal traitors here, right? And then now, it's like, no. I'm in favor of them, and it's free speech. He doesn't believe anything. He believes in more power for Donald Trump. So again, he will say and do whatever the hell he thinks. He responds to pressure. But it's mostly the last person he hears from. It's like when he ran and it was, all like, the wars are stupid, we're going to get out of the wars. We're still in all the wars. All of them. Right now. So what happened? What happened was the generals behind closed doors were like, yeah, here's what's going to happen. We're not going to pull out of Afghanistan and Iraq, so get used to it. And he's like, right, totally, we're going to do that. The best example of this actually is the pharma example. Trump used to say in his speeches all the time, we're getting ripped off. We're getting ripped off by big pharma. We're going to negotiate for better drug prices for Medicare. That's what we're going to do. It's going to be amazing. It took one meeting with pharmaceutical lobbyists for him to totally flip his position and say, I think it's very unfair to negotiate for lower drug prices with these pharmaceutical companies. Took one meeting. All it took was a handful of lobbyists to give him some BS argument, and he was like, no, right, you're totally right, I agree. This is what happens on every issue with him. Whoever's the last one in the room, he's like, they're right. So guess what? Now his response to the coronavirus, look at how weak it's been. Well, on the economy, he's got Larry frickin' Kudlow telling him what to do. And Larry Kudlow literally floated a capital gains tax cut to deal with COVID. That's a tax cut for people with investments. 90% of the market is owned by the top 10%. You're saying cut rich people's taxes and that'll help with COVID-19, with the bounce back from COVID-19. Are you insane? But that's the last person in the room. So Trump's like, absolutely. I think that's a great point, Larry. We're going to look at that very strongly. He doesn't believe anything. What a joke. So, and even if you're somebody who's a fan of him, how do you square this circle? How do you square this circle? I could do the same thing. We did this with Hillary, and everybody understood how devastating it was with Hillary. Hey, here's her on both sides of every issue over the years. She said one thing, then she said the opposite. One thing, then the opposite. And everybody's like, oh my God, she believes in nothing. This is the same thing. Wake up. Wake up. The guy's a fraud.